Welcome to Don't Mind Me, I Just Have ADHD, the podcast where fierce kindness meets the unfiltered truth. A one-stop shop about all things ADHD, where we smash the stigma and mystery around ADHD, depression, and the masks we wear at work and in life. I'm Ron, your ADHD guy, your guide, and your reminder that being different isn't a flaw. It's a biological advantage, a signal that you were never meant to blend in. You were built to make a difference. Here, we face the struggles that no one seems to get with heart. We unpack the chaos. We build strength through our sensitivity. We turn pain into power. Because kindness isn't weak, it's a revolution. And every time you show up for yourself, that's you taking your life back. So let's make it cool to be different. Let's make it brave. Let's make it yours.
You know, one thing when people are a little like having a hard time with that, sometimes that's a good way to get through to them. I'll say, like, do you want your kids to grow up like you did? You know, do you want your kids to have that same voice inside of you that you did? Because if you don't do this work, that's probably what's going to happen. And that can be incredibly motivating for people sometimes.
Hey, my beautifully different brains. I'm Ron Souers, your ADHD guy. And I just want to say, I'm so glad you're here. You're about to drop into part one of a raw and deeply real two-part conversation with the incredible Kayla Crane, a therapist, a mom, and a neurodivergent human who brings the truth with kindness. We're talking ADHD, trauma, relationships, late diagnosis, and all the voices we carry from childhood that still echo in our heads. This one's close to the heart. And if you've ever felt broken, ashamed, or misunderstood, you made it to the right place. And please, if you can stay tuned to the end, I have a special reward just for you. Now let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm here with Kayla Crane, and she's, honored us with her presence, with her expertise, and just real quick, could you tell me about your experience with ADHD, Kayla?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I have ADHD myself. And so I have a lot of experience in that. But also my
Yeah.
daughter has it. And I do work with a large amount of people that do have ADHD, whether diagnosed or not. I mean, sometimes just the symptoms, I treat more of like the symptoms rather than kind of like focusing on like whether they have a diagnosis or not. That's kind of what we kind of just like, how can we work with these symptoms, these the difficulties that they bring to relationships and that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of how I work with it professionally. And then personally, I think I've just learned after having it my whole life, without being diagnosed till I was an adult, I kind of just had to learn how do I do things, right? Because not diagnosed as a child, or it's what this is just how I am, right? Like if you're diagnosed, I feel like you have a little bit more direction. Okay, I struggle with focus, so this is, whatever the treatment is, be it medication or therapy or whatever. But I think without the diagnosis as a child, people don't, I think, identify the individual symptoms, if that makes sense. It's just like, oh, they're forgetful a lot or they talk a lot. and that's just them, not something that a challenge for them. It does, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally get like I'm in the same boat. Like I didn't get really diagnosed till I was like 2 or 3 years ago, and I was under the impression that it was like a child, like this was something that I grew out of. It was like a childhood thing. Um, so for you, what what was like your origin story?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, growing up, people would always kind of just say, oh, you're such an airhead, that kind of thing, like, oh, you're forgetful, that. But then I think when I got older and it was becoming a little bit more challenging. I went to grad school when I was a little bit older, and I was kind of recognizing this is this is, I wasn't like undergrad and like school before that, I didn't it wasn't too difficult for me. I was kind of able to manage it. But when it came to grad school, and like grad school, you have to write so many papers,
Yeah,
really long
it's crazy.
papers. And so that takes a lot of focus. That takes the ability to be able to do research and like switch from focusing on like an
Mhm.
article to a different thing to this. And I was getting really overwhelmed. And I mentioned it to my psychiatrist, and
Yeah,
he said he kind of did an assessment on me and said, okay, it looks like this is the case.
yeah, yeah. Was that how was that like for you? Was that relieving? Like what? How did you feel when he gave you that?
Yeah, I think I felt relieved, kind of like uh wow, I wasn't kind of just an airhead, right? I had a mental
Yeah,
disorder, and it's just something that's challenging to me. So I think yeah, it made me feel better. I don't know if validated's the word, but it just made me, oh, okay, there's a reason this isn't normal, right? No, well, this isn't typical, right?
hmm
And so it's very expected that there's the challenges that I was experiencing, and there's treatment for it, right? Again,
yeah.
whether medication or just therapy addressing it, because I was in therapy, but we weren't really addressing that piece of it, the ADHD and the focus. I was, again, just thought that that's who I was. I didn't even realize there was something to address.
Wow. Yeah. So that's interesting that you were in therapy and they kind of just missed that.
Mhm.
Um, so with you, like, did that create this desire to help people with ADHD, or was that something that was already there?
So in the while that happened, like I said, I was in grad school for marriage and family therapy. And so I knew I wanted to help people.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't realize that that was going to be, part of it. But now I think, even though I work with couples, sometimes I can pick up some things, and um, it'll kind of make me recognize, okay, there's some kind of like attention challenges there.
Yeah.
Again, whether they meet the complete criteria or not. Like I said, I kind of focus more on those symptoms. Um, but I think now I'm more easy to identify it, because even though I had like the knowledge of what ADHD was, like through the DSM, which is like the Encyclopedia of Mental Disorders, and through my schooling, it's very different when you're experiencing it, and
Yeah.
all of it's not just focus. A lot of
Yeah.
people think it's just focus, or maybe and hyperactivity. But there's so much more there. It really contributes to your mental state. It can contribute to rejection sensitivity.
hmm
There's so many things that it can impact, um, that now I can recognize, but I don't think I would have in the past. just because, like I said, that's kind of, I think that what people hear, I think a lot of times is ADHD means you have trouble focusing and, you're hyperactive, maybe fidgety or whatever.
Yeah.
But not all the other pieces that definitely impact everything. So I am able to, I think, recognize it more. And I think there's been a lot of times where I've had some feedback where you can kind of see it seems like it does give people hope,
Yeah.
because I see a lot of times people like working against it, right? Like
Yeah.
just be on time, just focus.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my husband recently, and I'm always late. I'm late everywhere. And I can plan to be an hour early, but stuff comes up and it's just something that I struggle with. I'm always 2 to 3 minutes late. And
Yeah.
and I was telling him, and I was like, I feel like a lot of people think it's like I'm being disrespectful, I'm not respecting their time. And while I understand that it's frustrating. It's also like it's something that I've tried every single trick, and I'm
Wow.
not able to get there on time. Like I said, sometimes it's 1, 2 minutes, but it's consistent, and it's not at all that I'm being disrespectful, not at all that I don't, appreciate someone's time or anything like that. It's just something I struggle with no matter what. So I think there's that like that perception sometimes that
Yeah.
people aren't like being considerate or respectful. And so I think when we are able to identify it, like with clients or even with myself, it's we can stop working against this and like working with it, right?
Hmm.
Like, okay, this is something I deal with. And so how can we do it differently, right? And like, um, in a relationship, your partner can hopefully be helpful in that. My husband, fortunately, is very punctual. And so he can help me a little bit with that,
Hmm.
that like encouragement to help me be more on time. Um, I have people that I've worked with people where their partner will say, like, you know, one example is they're not like tidy enough, right?
Hmm.
Like they have a hard time picking up after themselves. And the other, you know, the one who wasn't neurodivergent was, why can't you just do that? Like, why can't you just pick up that day? Or why can't you just not put the whatever on the floor right away? And so if we, instead of saying change who you are as a person, if we
Yeah.
can say this is a challenge, how can we do it differently, right? If the person keeps putting their coat on the sofa, maybe we could put a coat rack right by the door, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Maybe we can do things to help help that person meet their partner's needs without just trying to get them to change who they are as a person. Because
Yeah.
while the symptoms are hard and they suck, it's also, you know, that's just sometimes that's part of their character as well. And it's not necessarily something that has to change, but it's something that the symptoms are challenging. So let's try to figure out ways to make make it easier. I tell
Yeah.
people a lot of ADHD treatment is like tricks, like using timers, leaving yourself notes, using the calendar app. That's all that stuff is really helpful
Yeah.
uh, to kind of just get things done rather than just be different.
No, that's totally, that's powerful. It's about using different tools to help make your life easier instead of trying to change something that can't be changed,
Right.
really. Or it's going to take a long time and effort, and it's going to be very hard and may or may not have to change. You talked about earlier, um, those labels about, being called an airhead, and that's terrible, that people would give you that label. Do you feel like that resonates with like a deeper level of like trauma that you felt like that you identified yourself with that, without having a proper diagnosis?
That's a good question. I think, fortunately for me, um, they were my friends and kind of joking, so it wasn't in a cruel way, but it still
Okay.
was a label, like you said. And
Yeah.
I kind of just, okay, this is just who I am, you know, but fortunately I did pretty okay. I did pretty good in school, but a lot of people like I do work with trauma as well,
Yeah.
especially trauma and relationships. And I work with people, I tell people all the time, like our traumas stem from childhood. They get reinforced throughout our lives
Yeah.
and in our relationships, but they originate in childhood. And so I will often have somebody, I do exercises like inner child work and stuff. And
Yeah.
maybe somebody brings to their relationship some kind of belief of like, I'm not good enough. If
Yeah.
if it's somebody with ADHD, it wouldn't be at all uncommon to learn that as a child, they either were undiagnosed, and sometimes it also happens to children that are diagnosed, but they've been shamed for not getting like forgetting their homework or talking too much or, being late. All of those things, they're really
Mhm.
shamed as children by teachers and or parents or all these other people, particularly without that diagnosis. Again, it's just like, stop being like that. That's usually the message they get,
Yeah.
right? Which usually in hearing that for a long time, right? Or receiving that message, whether they're hearing those words or not, like be different. Like that's going to create a belief in somebody, likely something like there's something wrong with me, I'm defective,
Yeah.
I something to that effect, but that's going to show up in their relationships later in life. And so a lot of times when there's conflict, people that have grown up receiving that message, they'll immediately think there's something wrong with me, right? If their partner says,
Mm.
you I was disappointed that you did something. They're gonna go to there's something wrong with me. If their partner says, you didn't follow through with something, they're gonna say there's something wrong with me, right? If their
Mhm.
partner says you hurt my feelings, they're gonna go to there's something wrong with me. And so that's really, really common with children who were undiagnosed, as like I said, children undiagnosed. As adults now, they really carry some negative beliefs about who they are as a person often.
Yeah. No, I definitely can attest to that. Like, for the longest time growing up, and into my adult life, like I, carried with this thing with me that I'm unlovable, because of like, the way that my, father had raised me. And, I had there wasn't it wasn't like it was a physical um, like way that he abused me. It was more of, neglect. And it 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 made sense at the time because it just felt like growing up, you weren't supposed to show your feelings. But I was like a really sensitive. I've always been really sensitive, when it comes to like emotions. And I never understood why. I was like even more sensitive than my sister. And which was and I remember like crying in front of my dad, and he just kind of looked at me like, what is why are you doing this? Like, I was expecting a hug and maybe some like encouragement, and I just got more shame for like, you know, acting in a way that I shouldn't have been acting. But like doing more of that exploration, like I was able to understand like he was doing the best that he could, like with the way that he was raised.
Right.
And like it's kind of like a cycle of trauma that continues down and a lot of it, like you said, is based in childhood. And for me, like it took a while to see that as like, well, that happened so long ago. How is that still affecting me? And it's like because those voices that my parents were giving or my dad was like, and I love my dad. Like, he did the best that he could. He was always there for me when I needed him. And, I'm seeing him more as a person, like a little boy that needs a hug, still. And, it's like it's huge to be able to, to actually see like, hey, those voices are still like they're in my voice now,
Mhm.
telling me that I'm not good enough
Yeah.
because like, and you need to stop being so sensitive. But it's like now I'm starting to embrace that sensitivity, and
Mhm.
it's like it's huge. It's like it's such a freedom.
Yeah, that's, like you said, that could be definitely a lot of generational trauma with that stuff. And what we call that emotional neglect. Usually that
Yeah,
results in somebody with an avoidant attachment style. I don't know if you're familiar with attachment styles, but because what that shows that child is, again, like, I'm not worthy of love if I show my emotions, something to that effect.
yeah,
Um, Boys are often given the message, there's something wrong with you if you're emotional.
mm,
And so they have to learn to like shut that off. Usually either there's something wrong with me if I don't shut it off, or like what's the point of even talking about my emotions to my parents? They don't hear me. So it's
yeah,
usually one of the two that result in somebody shutting down and kind of turning those off throughout their lives until they become aware of it, hopefully, and want to change it. But that's a lot of times when people end up in my office. They're recognizing that, okay, I'm resisting these emotions and it they live inside of you, right? Like
yeah,
you don't turn them off, and trauma lives inside of you, and that's a trauma, right? And so it, like, even if you're not thinking about it, you're operating that way. You've got physical sensations, but like you said, that voice in your head is always there. And that's the first thought when there's conflict, when something goes wrong is, see, I knew it. I'm not worthy of love, right? Like this is evidence to show me that.
yeah,
Um, so that's a lot of what I do with people. It's a stereotype, but it's true more often men than not, just because of our society. But I help them like unlearn that and make it hopefully more okay for them to show their emotions. And I mean, kind of necessary for a healthy relationship.
yeah,
But,
yes,
one thing when people are a little like having a hard time with that, sometimes that's a good way to get through to them. I'll say, like, do you want your kids to grow up like you did? Do you want your kids to have that same voice inside of you that you did?
mm.
Um, because if you don't do this work, that's probably what's going to happen. And that can be incredibly motivating for people sometimes.
Yeah, and it's like, that there's that double standard there of like, well, I grew up this way and it was this way and it has to be this way, but it's like you're turning that on its head and being like, well, did you like the way that that was? Like, you have an opportunity here to change that, and give and receive a better way to do that. How do you how do you like explore that trauma and within a relationship dynamic? Like, because what you're doing is like incredibly, you know, intelligent, has like a lot of bravery involved, especially, you know, dealing with your own ADHD. So that, like that in its own is like powerful that you're able to teach something like that.
Yeah, the way that I work is I kind of like self-disclose a lot. I share my personal
Mm.
stories with clients, and which we're kind of taught in school to not do. But you know what? Like I think it really normalizes things for people. Like, hey, I go through this too, right? This is also a challenge in my relationship, even though this is what I do, right? I'm still a human being. I'm not, I don't do it on the perfect way every
Oh
time.
yeah,
And I understand the struggles and I struggle with it too. So I think that's helpful for people that it is normalized. Even sometimes people think like therapists have no problems, but like,
oh
no, I
yeah,
think a lot of us got into this career because we spent a lot of time in our own therapy. But so I think that's helpful. But also it's not at all hard to get to like that belief that they hold about themselves that stems from childhood. Usually there's one or maybe two or three, usually just one that kind of shows up consistently, but I'll just, ask them for a recent fight or just an example of something that went wrong. And
yeah,
so they say um, my uh, my partner and I were supposed to go on a trip and they canceled it or they got something like that. And I'll say, what does it mean about you that they canceled it? Usually that's where they'll say, or some form of, well, it means there's something wrong with me, or it means that they're going to leave me. It means they don't
yeah,
love me. Right.
yeah,
So right then it's like, okay, that's that belief that they're operating. And usually I'll ask them, what's your very earliest memory of having that same feeling? And
mm,
they'll usually, it's in childhood. I mean, consistently, it's in childhood. Um, and that's kind of, I'll ask them for their specific memory of when they first remember feeling that way. It doesn't have to be the actual first time they felt that way, but what they remember.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and a lot of times, like I said, with ADHD, it'll be my first grade teacher, would always tell me there was something wrong with me if I forgot my homework or something like that. And then
yeah,
that's right there where we would get okay, there's something wrong with me is probably that belief. So it's easy to get to. And once you do, it can kind of be like a light bulb moment because we'll go to all different kinds of conflict and it's okay, what does that mean about you? And it's consistent. It's almost always the same. Like I said, maybe there's two or three different choice, like
yeah,
different beliefs, but usually it's all the same that if we go deep enough, that's what it relates to is I'm not good enough or I'm rejected, something like that.
yeah. No, definitely. Um, and what's really helpful is like for me is to explore like whenever I do something that I think I shouldn't have done, I explore like instead of looking at like of course I'm like, well, why did I do that again? And there's some guilt. But it's like, okay, here's the chance to explore like that event and like, okay, why am I doing this? Let's dig deeper to like the reasons why. This is an opportunity to discover more about like where these limiting beliefs are coming from, and those things are huge. And it's also like understanding that like in that teacher example, like you didn't there must be something wrong with they're only reacting out of frustration and their own personal trauma. So it's like these events that, especially with kids, are very traumatic to the kids, but it's like it wasn't done in an intentional way. It was just, probably stemming from their own trauma, and frustrations and expectations of how this should be, and a lack of understanding of like what's going on. So with that is like, how do you transfer that to like a work relationship? Like when they go into work, and do you have any experience with, maybe like how to talk to a manager about it, or like what to look for
When when they respond differently, you mean? Or inappropriately, is that what you mean?
inappropriately, or you want to express, like rejection sensitivity. Like if something happened, and you're feeling overwhelmed and the other person doesn't understand like what just happened, like
Yeah,
something like that.
that's a good question. I think awareness obviously is the first step, that self-awareness.
Hmm.
Able to determine like, is this me interpreting things like through this lens of I'm not good enough? Or is this like something that, that I think most people would be hurt by or upset by? Um, when we have like a disproportionate response to something, usually that means we're responding to something from the past. Um, and so, and we use those same adaptations that we used as children. So maybe that child that was shamed for forgetting their homework or whatever, maybe every time that happened, they completely shut down,
Yeah.
right? Maybe they just wall off. Well, in
Hmm.
adulthood, and like I said, most of those things will get down to the belief. So, but it can even be something small, right? Like, hey, you forgot to get the mail. That partner could go down to that. That means I'm not good enough and completely
Yeah.
shut off, wall off, because they're doing the same thing they did as a child. Um, and so I think being able to like really be aware enough to like measure this. Okay, is this because a lot of times that partner would always also look at the other person at like they would look at it as an argument or a fight, right?
Yeah.
Like basically, why are you saying that I'm not good enough, right? But
Yeah.
really what the partner said was you forgot to get the mail. Or
No,
that
it's
the boss says, right, so in the work context, hey, you didn't respond to my email yesterday, like you said, right? If that if the response seems to just completely shut down and kind of, okay, those thoughts in your head, what's wrong with me? Damn it, like all that shame. Um, that might be a good like a good a good sign that that maybe this is not maybe this is more of a you thing, maybe this is more of like your trauma and stuff like that,
yeah.
right? What would, and sometimes it's just like if you have a friend at work kind of checking it out, like, hey, like with that, like what do you think about this? And maybe their friend at work says, yeah, that you said you were going to send the email. Like, there's nothing wrong with you, but you didn't send the email. They weren't mad
Yeah.
at you. There's nothing. Or they might say, yeah, that sucks, right? Like, that was wrong. And I think so the first step would definitely be that awareness as to like step back and reflect. Is this a me thing,
Yeah.
right? Am I interpreting things based on my past? And if that's the case, then it takes, I think, some like self-soothing that and okay, this is me. What do I need to do? Um, like do I need to take a walk or journal or talk to someone or whatever? But if it's with the if the person did really cross a boundary, um I think it's helpful to come back to it in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Um because we can be really impulsive, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, say things that we maybe wouldn't have said the next day. And so I think it's a really good feature on email and on our phones that we can like type something and send it later
Yeah.
because that's, I think that can be a really a problem that a lot of people experience, that impulsivity in
Yes.
responding. And so it there's also that emotional dysregulation piece that comes along with ADHD, right? And so you can receive some kind of message, whether it fits the situation or not, become incredibly emotionally dysregulated, and then respond out of that place, which is not usually what we want to be doing, right? On a good
Yeah.
day, that's probably not what we would do.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think those are kind of the way that I personally work with that kind of stuff. And I think it can be helpful just taking a little space from the incident and being able to see it a little more clearly.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely, resonates. And, I try to do that a lot is like, explore, okay, did this come from me? Or, is this something that's like, am I overreacting to this based upon whatever's going on with me? Um, and usually I try to talk to other people that I work with that I can trust, and like relay the situation and in as objective of a way that I can. Um, and then like if I really feel like it was something that needs to be addressed, then I usually if it if it like if it's within reason, like yeah, I'll wait, till like I've cooled down because I don't want to say anything that's going to, like I want to say this in the best way possible. Wow, that was just part one. And Kayla brought so much truth, clarity, and compassion to the table. If this resonated with you, don't miss out on part two next week, where we go even deeper into how ADHD and trauma shape our identity and relationships, both at home and in the workplace, and how we can start healing. Yeah, and if you want to connect with Kayla Crane, just visit southdenvertherapy.com and it will be in the show notes. And hey, if this episode hit you in the chest in the best way, I want to invite you again to join me on July 18th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 a.m. Pacific Time for my free webinar, Unlocking Your Potential Through Mindfulness. It's a 60-minute, heartfelt session rooted in self-kindness, science, and strength. And yeah, it's free, and there's going to be questions and answers at the end. Just go to www.youradhdguy.com. That's youradhdguy.com and book your spot now. Let's stop fighting who we are and start thriving as we are. Sign up, bring a friend. Let's grow together. May the source be with you.